In the dead of night, a storm rages as Mike Tyson steps into a lonely diner, unaware that a brutal gang is about to terrorize the place. When they threaten the waitress and demand more than just food, Mike's instincts kick in. Witness the legendary boxer face off against ruthless thugs in an epic, unforgettable showdown that will leave you on the edge of your seat, proving that true strength lies in standing up for what's right. In the heart of a stormy night, the neon sign of a lonely roadside diner flickered, casting eerie shadows on the rain-soaked pavement. The bell above the door chimed ominously as Mike Tyson stepped inside, his imposing figure silhouetted against the dim glow of the diner's interior. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the chilling rain, but the tension in the air was palpable. Behind the counter, a young woman named Sarah wiped down the surface with practiced efficiency, her dark eyes flickering with a mix of exhaustion and anxiety. Her name tag read, Sarah, and her curls were pulled back into a tight ponytail, a testament to her long shift. She glanced up as Mike approached, her smile polite but guarded. "Good evening, sir. What can I get you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the underlying tension. Mike returned the smile, his deep voice calm. "Double burger, fries, and a coffee, please." Sarah nodded, jotting down the order. As she turned towards the kitchen, Mike noticed the stiffness in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly. Something was off. He settled into a corner booth, stretching his legs, but his instincts were on high alert. Suddenly, the front door slammed open with a force that made the bell jangle violently. 5 men strode in, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor. The air shifted, the quiet conversations cutting off abruptly. The leader, a stocky man with a deep scar across his cheek, surveyed the room with a sneer. His name was Jack, and his pale blue eyes landed on Sarah, his lips curling into a smirk. "Well, well, look at this," Jack drawled, walking to the counter and planting both hands down with a loud slap. "Our favorite little waitress is still here. Thought you would have learned by now, girl." Sarah's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the counter, her voice steady despite the sharp edge of tension. "Whatever you want, I'm not giving it to you." One of the other bikers, a lanky man with a chipped tooth, laughed. "Oh, I think you will. You always do eventually." The tension thickened, suffocating in its weight. Mike could feel the shift in the room, the fear that gripped the other patrons. He knew he couldn't stand by and watch. Jack reached out and plucked a sugar packet from the counter, rolling it between his fingers. "See, that's where you're wrong," he said, his voice like oil sliding over gravel. "This diner is in our territory, which means you pay if you want to keep it running. It's how things work around here." Sarah stood her ground. "I told you last time, I'm not giving you a damn cent." Jack sighed dramatically, tossing the sugar packet onto the counter. "See, I don't like that attitude. That kind of disrespect gets people into trouble, doesn't it, boys?" The chipped tooth biker grinned, stepping forward. "Oh yeah, big trouble." The third biker, a wiry guy with a tattoo crawling up his neck, suddenly reached over and knocked over a tray of silverware, sending a clatter of knives and forks onto the floor. Sarah flinched, and Mike's grip on his coffee mug tightened. Jack leaned in closer to Sarah, lowering his voice just enough for the threat to feel more personal. "You either pay up, or bad things start happening. Windows get broken, fires start, people get hurt." As he reached for Sarah's wrist, Mike moved swiftly. His hand shot out, catching Jack's wrist in a grip so strong it made the biker suck in a sharp breath. A dead silence fell over the diner. Jack turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing as he registered the iron hold on his arm. His gaze traveled up to meet Mike's face, recognition dawning as the biker took in the broad shoulders, the massive forearms, and the calm, but unmistakably dangerous look in his eyes. One of the bikers whispered, "That's Mike Tyson." Mike didn't move, didn't speak. His fingers dug into Jack's wrist just enough to send a message, a warning. Jack chuckled, but there was an edge of unease in it. "Well, damn," he mused. "Looks like we got ourselves a celebrity." Mike spoke, his voice low and controlled. "You've had your fun. Now leave." For a moment, Jack hesitated, his pride warring with common sense. Then something changed in his expression. The hesitation vanished, replaced by something darker. "You think being a big-time boxer means something in the real world?" Jack wrenched his arm free, stepping back. "Newsflash, tough guy. This ain't the ring. Out here, your moves don't mean shit." The bikers laughed, their unease evaporating. Jack cracked his knuckles. "All right, boys. Looks like we'll have to teach our Hollywood friend here a little lesson." Mike exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. The fight was coming, and he was ready. The diner was silent, the air thick with tension, as Jack's men spread out, forming a loose semicircle around Mike Tyson. The other patrons shrank back, clutching their drinks, unwilling to get involved. The first move came fast. The chipped-tooth biker lunged forward, swinging a heavy right hook aimed at Mike's jaw. But Mike had already seen it coming. He ducked at the last second, the punch grazing over his head. In a single motion, he drove his shoulder into the biker's gut, lifting him off his feet and slamming him onto the table with a loud crash. Plates shattered, silverware scattered, and the entire table buckled under the impact. The diner erupted into chaos. Another biker, the one with the neck tattoo, tried to grab Mike from behind, wrapping an arm around his throat. Mike reacted instantly, grabbing the biker's wrist and twisting it sharply. The man let out a pained yell, but Mike wasn't finished. With one powerful motion, he hoisted him up and slammed him down in a modified belly-to-belly suplex. The floorboards shook from the impact. The third biker, a burly man with a thick beard, grabbed a chair and swung it at Mike's back. The wood splintered on impact, but Mike barely flinched. He turned, eyes flashing, and drove a devastating elbow into the biker's face, sending him sprawling into a booth. Jack's smirk had vanished. He wasn't laughing anymore. One of his remaining men hesitated before pulling out a switchblade. Sarah gasped, "Mike, watch out!" The blade flashed as the biker lunged. Mike sidestepped just in time, grabbing the man's wrist and slamming it against the counter, forcing him to drop the weapon. Before the biker could react, Mike gripped him by the collar and sent him flying across the diner, where he landed with a painful thud against a jukebox, making the music cut out abruptly. Now it was just Jack. The leader of the gang stood there, his eyes flicking between his groaning fallen men, and Mike, who hadn't even broken a sweat. The remaining customers, who had been hiding behind tables and booths, slowly peeked out, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. Mike cracked his neck and took a step forward. Jack instinctively reached behind his jacket and pulled out a brass knuckle, slipping it onto his right hand. "You got some fight in you, I'll give you that," Jack growled. "But I ain't like my boys. I know how to take down a big guy like you." Mike smirked. "You sure about that?" Jack lunged, throwing a brutal punch aimed straight at Mike's face. But Mike was faster. He sidestepped, grabbed Jack's arm mid-swing, and with sheer strength, twisted him around before lifting him up and executing a perfect uppercut, slamming him down onto a broken table. The wood snapped under the force, and Jack let out a choked groan before going completely still. The diner fell silent. All 5 bikers were down. Sarah stared, her breath shaky, her heart hammering. Mike dusted off his hands and glanced around the wrecked diner. Booths were overturned, shattered dishes covered the floor, and the jukebox sparked, where the last biker had crashed into it. The neon open sign flickered in the window, struggling to stay lit after one of the bikers had been thrown into it. Sirens wailed in the distance. Mike stood up as the distant glow of police lights flashed through the rain-speckled windows. The bikers, barely conscious, groaned as they tried to pull themselves up. Sarah finally found her voice. "Mike, The front door swung open again, but this time it wasn't more trouble. It was the cops. Mike sighed, rolling his shoulders. "Looks like the cleanup crew is here." The flashing red and blue lights painted the rain-slicked pavement outside the diner as two police cruisers skidded to a stop. The sirens cut off abruptly, replaced by the sound of slamming doors and hurried footsteps. Officers in dark uniforms rushed into the diner, hands on their holsters, scanning the wreckage before them. The scene was pure chaos. Overturned tables, shattered dishes, and 5 battered, groaning bikers sprawled across the floor. Mike Tyson stood near the counter, arms crossed, watching as the officers took in the mess. Sarah was still behind the counter, gripping it so tightly her knuckles had gone white. A few customers who had remained in the diner sat in stunned silence, some whispering among themselves. A tall, broad-shouldered officer with graying hair stepped forward, his name tag reading Sergeant Davis. He narrowed his eyes at the sight of Jack still lying atop the shattered remains of a table, barely able to move. Well, if it ain't Jack and his boys," Sergeant Davis said, his tone dry and unimpressed, as if this weren't the first time he had encountered them. He turned his gaze to Sarah. "They giving you trouble again?" Sarah nodded, her voice steadier than before. "They came in demanding money for protection. When I refused, they started threatening me. Then they tried to get physical." Sergeant Davis let out a tired sigh and pulled out a small notepad. "That sounds about right." He turned to his partner, a younger officer with a sharp jawline. "Call it in. We're taking them in for extortion, assault, and destruction of property." Jack let out a low groan and tried to sit up, but the pain from Mike's uppercut was still keeping him down. This is," he wheezed. "That big bastard attacked us first." One of the other bikers, still holding his ribs from being thrown into the jukebox, nodded weakly. Yeah, we were just minding our own business. He jumped us." Sergeant Davis raised an eyebrow. "You really expect me to believe that?" Before the officer could respond, a voice from the corner spoke up. "Actually, I got the whole thing right here." All heads turned toward a young man in a trucker cap, sitting in a booth near the window. He held up his phone, the screen still recording. "Got every second of it. These guys came in harassing the lady, calling her all kinds of names, knocking things over. They even pulled a knife on him." He gestured toward Mike. "Man only fought back when they tried to attack him." Sergeant Davis's expression remained unreadable as he took the phone from the man's hand and watched a few seconds of the footage. Slowly, he nodded. "Well, looks like that settles it." He looked down at Jack, who had gone pale. "Anything else you'd like to add?" Jack clenched his jaw, but he had lost. Sergeant Davis signaled his officers. "Cuff him." Within seconds, the officers were pulling zip ties from their belts and yanking the bikers to their feet. Jack struggled for a moment, but winced in pain from the fight. One of his men, the one with the broken nose, groaned. "Man, you don't gotta be so rough. You don't gotta be such a dumbass." "You don't gotta be such a dumbass," Davis muttered, securing his wrists. He looked toward Sarah. "You pressing charges?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Mike, then back at the sergeant. Her hands were still shaking slightly, but there was something else there now. Something firm, unwavering. "Yes." Jack's head snapped up. What? You? You heard her, Davis said, pushing him forward. You heard her. As the officers dragged the bikers toward the door, Jack twisted his head to glare at Sarah. You're making a mistake, girl. You think this is over? I got people, and they don't like it when one of their own gets locked up. Mike took a single step forward, and Jack immediately shut his mouth, his body tensing involuntarily, remembering the power behind those hands. Mike leaned down just enough to look him in the eye. This is over, he said quietly. You come near her again, and I won't stop at just putting you through a table. Jack swallowed hard, believing him. Davis gave a sharp tug on Jack's cuffs, dragging him out of the diner. One by one, the rest of the bikers were taken outside and stuffed into the back of the cruisers. The sound of the doors slamming shut echoed through the night. Inside the diner, it was silent. The tension had lifted, but the weight of everything that had just happened still lingered. Customers started moving again, some whispering in amazement, others murmuring among themselves. A few people stole glances at Mike, as if still processing that Mike Tyson had just taken down an entire gang in their small-town diner. Sarah exhaled slowly, running a hand through her curls. She turned to Mike, her expression a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. You didn't have to do that. Mike shrugged. Yeah, I did. She looked at him again, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Why'd you step in? Mike was quiet for a beat before answering. Because I've seen too many people let fear win. I've seen it before. Figured it was about time somebody didn't. Sarah swallowed, her throat tight. She had spent so long feeling powerless against people like Jack, so long trying to convince herself that as long as she stayed out of their way, she'd be safe. But seeing what had happened tonight, seeing someone refuse to be intimidated, refuse to let them win, made something inside her shift. The diner door swung open again, but this time it was a customer who had been hiding behind a booth. A woman in her 50s, still clutching her purse, stepped forward. That was incredible, she murmured. You really showed them. A man near the window nodded. Yeah, that was the best thing I've seen all year. Another chuckled. Forget movies. Mike, you should do this full time. Mike smirked, shaking his head. I'll stick to boxing. Sarah laughed softly, the first real laugh she had let out in what felt like ages. She turned and grabbed a clean coffee mug. Well, I don't know about you, but I could really use a cup of coffee. Mike chuckled, sliding into his booth again. You know what? I think I'll have that burger now. Sarah grinned, already moving toward the kitchen. Outside, the police cars pulled away, their sirens off but their presence still lingering in the air. The night was quieter now, calmer. The town didn't feel as small anymore, and inside the diner, things finally started to feel right. In today's world, standing up for what's right often means facing our fears and confronting injustice, much like Sarah and Mike did in the diner. The story teaches us that remaining silent in the face of intimidation only emboldens those who seek to control and exploit. It's crucial to support one another, as unity can overcome even the most daunting challenges. Moreover, true strength isn't about physical prowess, but about the courage to act when others are too afraid. By embracing this mindset, we can create safer, more just communities where everyone feels empowered to stand against wrongdoing.
If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe Undercover Insights channel.